Remnant 2 is one of the best action RPG games to come out in the last several years, but there's a decent chance that it may have flown under the radar for you. If you're one of these people that have never played Remnant 2, then this video is actually for you. I'll be giving you a complete breakdown of the game, all the pros, some of the cons, and the unique elements that make Remnant 2 such an amazing experience. By the end of this video, you should have a pretty good idea if this is the game for you, and if it's worth playing for the first time in 2024. If you're not subscribed, welcome to the channel, and if you are, thanks for coming back. Let's just jump right into it. Remnant 2 is a lot of different games rolled into one, and usually that results in a messy experience. But in the case of Remnant 2, it creates something special and unique. At its core, it's a third-person shooter action RPG that plays like a mix of Gears of War and Mass Effect. But it's also a Souls-like. And I know some of you might be rolling your eyes already, but the first Remnant dropped in 2019, and many people dubbed it Dark Souls with guns, and while that was a very basic comparison, it was also pretty accurate. Intense, challenging combat, fog walls, stamina systems, cryptic lore told through item descriptions and NPCs, level-based shortcuts, and deep build crafting really showed Remnant 2's Souls influence proudly, or Remnant 1 in this case. But it's a lot more than that as well. It's also a rogue-like, featuring procedurally generated content that not only lets Remnant 2 stand out on its own, but benefits the game in almost every way. But I'll touch a little bit more on that procedurally generated content in just a bit. For now, let's focus on the combat and build depth. As I mentioned earlier, Remnant 2 plays like a mix of Gears and Mass Effect, with some melee combat thrown in for good measure. There's no cover mechanics, but the second-to-second combat reminds me a lot of those games. Shooting is tight and snappy, and honestly just feels fucking great. There are tons of guns to use, from more basic weapons like shotguns, pistols, rifles, to more bizarre weapons that you'll often get from defeating powerful bosses, solving puzzles, or completing events. In between all the shooting, you'll be activating potent and impactful abilities based on your class archetype, as well as casting weapon mods which function like spells which can be directly attached to your weapons. Combat in Remnant 2 is extremely satisfying, and it's also pretty challenging, especially on the higher difficulties. You will need to be mindful of your enemy's attacks, learn to dodge appropriately just like you would in any Souls game. This includes careful management of your stamina, ammo, and cooldowns. This all comes together to create a very, very satisfying gameplay loop, shooting your weapons, casting a class ability, dodging a few attacks, maybe going in for a melee strike or two, or just using your weapon mods in the span of very quick, intense encounters that pretty much are always happening. Your playstyle can vary greatly based on your build, and the build crafting in this game is second to none. One of my favorite things about RPG games is creating builds and diving deep into making my character. There are so many layers that go into how your character plays, and for this section, I just wanted to show you how deep this game actually is. At the start, you'll have to choose your archetype. You'll only have a handful to choose from at the beginning, which all have their own strengths and playstyle, but there are tons more you can unlock through discovery and secrets as you play the game. That's one of the best aspects of Remnant 2. Nearly everything in this game needs to be earned, either through solving puzzles, defeating powerful bosses, completing events, or sometimes just by being in the right place at the right time. Everything from weapons, armor sets, rings, passive traits, and yes, even unlockable classes are earned through these means. First off, you have your archetype, which determines your active abilities, as well as passive perks and traits that you can have. You can actually have two archetypes equipped at one time, allowing you to create a unique dual class. You can create some really awesome combinations, and each of these archetypes level up individually, which will slowly unlock additional features and bonuses along the way. On top of that, you have tons of armor sets, each with their own defenses, elemental resistances, and even weight values. Then of course, you have your weapons, which have predetermined stats like damage, mag sizes, damage fall off, etc. This is not a looter shooter, do not be confused. All weapons are discovered in set ways or set locations, but they can all be upgraded and equipped with weapon mods. As I mentioned earlier, weapon mods function like spells or additional active skills that come in a large variety of different effects. Most mods can be freely swapped out between weapons and come in all shapes and sizes, from imbuing your ammo with different elemental effects, to creating fire tornadoes, or launching devastating special attacks. When you pair these weapon mods with your class skills, and just how unique each weapon truly is from one another, you can get some very awesome combat variety. But it doesn't stop there. There are over 100 different rings and amulets to equip, which further fine-tune your build and playstyle. And as you can see here, I'm focusing on status effects and elemental damage, so my loadout reflects that. Some of these items are found randomly based on that procedurally generated content that I mentioned earlier, and some again are found in very specific ways. But we're still not done. You also have traits. Traits are passive skills that can be upgraded by finding tomes of knowledge throughout your playthrough. Some traits are tied to specific classes until they are maxed out, which will then allow you to equip them with different archetypes. These are all done by completing certain events and clearing dungeons and just about everything else in the game. These can be as simple as increasing your max stamina or health, to increasing your evade distance, reload speed, or allowing you to lifesteal off of weapon damage. In Remnant 2, you travel to different worlds. Each of these worlds come with their own enemies, bosses, dungeons, stories, puzzles, and most importantly, loot. The coolest aspect of Remnant 2 is how it handles this. When you start up a fresh campaign in Remnant 2, you will be given 1 to 3 worlds to travel to. This is completely random, and not only is the world you get random, but each of these worlds have 3 possible unique story campaigns that you could possibly get, which means that you can have you and your buddy both playing the game separately. You can each get a completely different experience. And even if you both happen to get the same world, the odds are that you both get the same story within that world is very slim. The campaign will eventually take you through each of these 3 main worlds, but the order that you see these planets and the stories within them are again random. So the loot you can obtain is determined by which world you get, as well as the story campaign within it. So if you want to see everything the game has to offer, you will need to replay and revisit these worlds multiple times, and that's where Adventure Mode comes into play. Adventure Mode allows you to re-roll individual worlds without restarting your campaign, so you can experience new stories, complete new dungeons, and face new bosses, which will in turn increase your ever-growing collection of loot and build options. Your first playthrough will likely have your character equipped with whatever loot you happen to find, but as you replay through Adventure Mode, you'll find more and more items, unlock new classes, earn new traits, which will in turn allow you to fine-tune your build and tackle higher difficulties. You can easily sink 50 hours or more on a single character, especially now that the game has had 3 DLC expansions, which add even more content to the game's 3 main worlds. Some bosses will even need to be defeated multiple times in multiple different ways to unlock everything they have to offer. And all this can be done solo or co-op, which really allows you to fine-tune the experience to your liking. Playing the game solo can sometimes feel like a survival horror game, especially on the Bloodborne-inspired world of Losum. Powerful enemies can randomly spawn in, and if you're not prepared, can easily send you back to the nearest checkpoint. Whereas playing in a group can make the game feel more like a sort of tactical MMO experience where each of you fire off abilities and juggle enemy aggro. Enemy health and density are scaled to reflect the number of players, and for the most part does a good job of balancing the experience. One player can fill a more supportive role, while the other can be a major damage dealer or even a tanky melee fighter with heavy armor and defense-based abilities. I played through the entire game at launch solo, as well as playing through a good chunk of the game with my buddy in his playthrough, which again was a very different experience than my own on my first playthrough. So all of this fantastic combat and replay value is tied up all together with gorgeous graphics and sound design. Remnant 2 was one of the first games to launch that was built on Unreal Engine 5, and it shows. I played this on PS5, and for the most part, the performance was solid, but I did experience lots of frame issues from time to time, especially in co-op. But each of the worlds are brilliantly crafted, take full advantage of the power of Unreal Engine 5, from the lush jungles of Yeisha, the dark alleys and streets of Losum, to the barren plains of the sci-fi world of Nerud. Each of these planets look great, but it's really the sound design that brings everything to the next level. Enemy attacks are carefully telegraphed by important sound cues that train your ears to react accordingly. Specific sound cues also play, alerting you to elite enemy spawns and enemy hordes. The sound effects of guns, enemies, and the overall ambience is fantastic, and the soundtrack is also great as well.
Okay.
So I've pretty much spent the last 10 minutes pretty much gushing about Remnant 2. It is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's definitely one of my favorite games of last year, for sure, but there are some issues with the game as well. The biggest is its performance in co-op. I can't really speak for the other platforms, PC, Xbox, but playing this on PS5 in balance mode, which is supposed to be 60 FPS, when you do play in co-op, you're going to experience some performance issues, 100%. It's very annoying. The game's still completely playable, but do keep that in mind that if you are trying to roll with a group of 3, you're not going to get that super smooth 60 FPS. Also, some of the things that you need to do to earn items, gear, loot can be very convoluted and tedious. Some things require you to have a very specific item in a specific place at a specific time and do a specific thing, or solve a very, very, complex and again convoluted puzzle. I'm all about the secrets in this game and the discovery. I absolutely love that. It's actually one of the coolest aspects of the game, but do keep in mind that some of it is going to be very tedious and annoying if you do plan on getting everything that the game has to offer. The original Remnant was one of my favorite games of 2019, and Remnant 2 improves upon its predecessor in nearly every single way. The bosses are better designed, the worlds are more interesting, the story is better told, and most importantly, the combat and build crafting is better than ever. With the sheer number of weapons, armor, rings, classes to unlock, builds to create, and stories to experience, you can very quickly find yourself sinking dozens of hours into Remnant 2. With the roguelike elements, it means you will find a very different first playthrough than your friends, and honestly, it's a treat to discuss with the community or your buddies about how different your first trip through the game was to theirs. And if you really want to tackle everything Remnant 2 has to offer, you have tons of replay value with its adventure mode, and now 3 DLCs which add even more to the already packed base game. It's the only game that I've actually bothered to platinum, and all these elements come together to create something that you really can't get anywhere else, and is 100% worth playing in 2024 and beyond. Gunfire Games have cemented themselves as a stellar studio, and at this point, I can't wait to see what they do with Remnant 3. I really do hope this video was helpful for you guys if you had not played Remnant 2. Hopefully, by the end of this, you got a pretty clear idea if this is something that you will enjoy, and I think you will. It's honestly one of my favorite games, and it does so many things right. It's a very unique experience, and I really do hope that we get a Remnant 3 down the line. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and a sub. Till the next one, peace out, guys, and take care.